So we're going to be back in the book of Daniel, and the title of the whole series is The Wise Shall Understand, and this is the study of Daniel, lesson 4, No Compromise, and we're going to be looking in this lesson, Daniel chapter 1, verses 6 to 21. This is part 2 of 2 in this particular part. Okay, we're going to do a little review because we had a little bit of a break. So, Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and destroyed it." And verse 2, "And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Aspenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans." So these were people. Young men that were able to stand in the king's palace. They were the brightest and the best that Israel had to offer, and they were princes. At least Daniel was a prince. And verse 5, "And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king." So earlier we saw that critics attacked Daniel because of the many accurate fulfillments of prophecy found there. As we go through the study of Daniel, you're going to find that there's some amazing, amazing prophecies that are in this book. That if you understand this, you'll understand why Daniel is repeatedly attacked by those who do not believe in miracles, the supernatural, foretelling, whatever. Many today in the church want to avoid the Word of God in the prophetic areas because it disturbs people. And you don't want to disturb people because you'll find an empty church, so they think. But the wise will understand. They say that because of these prophecies, Daniel must have been written much later than those events. Because the prophecies in Daniel are so specific, as we will find as we get further on in. There are fulfilled prophecies in Daniel, which we'll bring out for you. Fulfilled prophecies that speak of historical events that took place after Daniel wrote this book. So they try to make it that Daniel didn't write this book and that it was written much later after the events that were prophesied. And of course, events that's even future, they just give it a different interpretation to much. This is quite a bit of the church that does this. It is good to study Daniel because there are yet many prophecies therein that await fulfillment. That's why we particularly study Daniel. And I said before, it is very difficult to study Daniel without also studying Revelation almost side by side. So as we go through Daniel, we will look at the book of Revelation as well. So now remember Jesus testified to the validity of Daniel as a prophet in Matthew 24:15. So if you look at just that, Jesus is testifying that Daniel was indeed a prophet. He is saying a couple of things. He's saying that Daniel existed. Daniel wrote the book of Daniel when he said he did it during the Babylonian captivity, and that there are prophetic events. And right there in the middle of Jesus Christ's prophetic utterances in the book of Matthew, in Matthew 24, we find in verse 15, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand." Now, we're speaking of the abomination of desolation. Now, that's an event that we find in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. And that event says that there will be an abomination set up in a temple, because it talks about I think I have that a little bit later coming up, but I'll tell you right now that it speaks of a time when the Antichrist will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, and we're talking about sevens there. It's talking about sevens. And seven, the week is a seven. Rather than translated week, it should be translated seven. And so that you understand, we're talking about weeks of years. And you can do a scriptural study on that, and you'll find that it is indeed talking about weeks of years based on the entire prophecy, which begins in 9 verse 24 of Daniel and runs through 9:27. And so it's very clear there. So a comparison of Daniel to Revelation. Now, the book of Daniel accurately reveals the first coming of Jesus, his death, and the destruction of Israel, Jerusalem, and the temple. So we see that in Daniel. So they should have not been surprised. Israel should not have been surprised. The Jewish leaders should not have been surprised that the temple would be destroyed. But they also should not have been surprised that Jesus Christ was going to come, and they should have known exactly when he was going to come. The first coming is predicted in the Scriptures right to the day. Right to the day. And those are in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 26. So, Revelation begins with events that will take place after these, and that's mentioned in Daniel 12, verse 9. Also, secondly, the book of Daniel gives an outline of world history from King Nebuchadnezzar to the first coming of Jesus, not found in Revelation. Gives an outline of world history. You're going to be amazed at the world history that you're going to see coming up. And it begins with King Nebuchadnezzar and runs to the first coming of Jesus. And this outline of world history is the reason that Daniel is so important to Revelation, is because Revelation is almost a continuation of Daniel. So Daniel tells you things that Revelation does not tell you. And so they go together so well, because they're speaking about the same things. And Revelation gives an outline of what will happen after the second coming of Jesus, not found in the book of Daniel. So you got some things in Revelation that's not found in the book of Daniel. Put those two books together, and you have a complete picture. So, thirdly, the book of Daniel will be helpful to those who missed the rapture to know how to identify the beginning of the tribulation period. What group of nations will rule the world, and who will be their last leader? So, if you happen to miss the rapture, be sure to read the book of Daniel, particularly in these verses that I had just talked about. Fourthly, the book of Daniel gives us a clearer understanding of God's ability to protect the Jews than any other book in the Bible. He can protect them. And we'll bring that out as we go through. I think Ezekiel is also another good one. It talks about the Jews. It talks about the Jews returning to their land. So another book to marry with all of this is the book of Ezekiel. Jeremiah is another one that Ezekiel depends on Jeremiah a lot for his. So if you're going to read Ezekiel, you need to read Jeremiah alongside it. So these things go together, do you see? And fifthly, the book of Daniel gives us information about the influence of evil spirits on nations and their leaders. So you'll see that as we go through this. Now, sixthly, the book of Daniel gives us the skeleton of the end times, or an outline. That's the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel is an outline of the end times. Now, Revelation gives us the flesh, many of the details. Daniel gives you the outline. You fill it in with Revelation, with the details. See how they go together? They combine to give us a more complete picture. Daniel and Revelation go hand in hand. Now, we have seen in the opening verses of Daniel speak of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, coming against Judah in 605 BC and carrying the Jews into captivity. We've already seen that. And we saw that Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed, and the best and the brightest of the young men were taken to be trained for Nebuchadnezzar's new world order. Now also the temple treasures were taken and placed in the pagan temples of Babylon. This will be important later in our study. Names mean something. Names mean something. So you want to name your child with a good name. Daniel chapter 1, verse 6. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. Now, why on earth would he do such a thing? They had perfectly good names given to them by their parents. The Hebrew names of the Hebrew children, Daniel means God is my judge. Hananiah means God or Jehovah is gracious, or God's gift, the Lord's beloved. Wouldn't you like to have a name like that? God's gift. Lord is gracious. God is gracious. Mishael means who is like God. God is great. Jehovah is gracious. Azariah, God is my helper. Jehovah has helped. All of those names are worthy names to be given to a child. That might not go over so well today with those names, but except for Daniel, maybe even Hananiah. Mishael and Azariah, people will wonder where you got those names, but good names. Now these Hebrew names revealed the judgment, the grace, the greatness, and the provision of God. They reveal monotheism. And monotheism means a belief in one God. So their names testified to the existence of one and only the creator of the universe, God himself. That's what their names represented and testified of. Critics, here we go with the critics again, attempt to say that Daniel did not exist. They have a hard time with the history of it all because they keep digging up things that prove them wrong, but then they try to say that Daniel did not exist. Well, if Daniel didn't exist, then who wrote the book? But Daniel was a contemporary of Ezekiel and is mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 3, in a statement of irony against the king of Tyre. He's speaking irony here in Ezekiel 28, verse 3. He says, "Behold, thou art wiser than Daniel." In other words, he's mocking the king. "Thou art wiser than Daniel." He's talking to the king of Tyre. "There is no secret that they can hide from thee." So the key thing there is that he mentions Daniel. So in order to deny Daniel, you have to deny Ezekiel as well. And Ezekiel was contemporary with Daniel. They overlap just a little bit, but they're contemporary nevertheless. The Babylonian names of the Hebrew children, Daniel or Belteshazzar. Now this is Belteshazzar now, which was the name given to Daniel. It means whom Bel favors, keeper of the treasures of the princes of Bel, may Bel protect his life. So it is the name of a pagan god. Even back then, the Babylonians were denying the existence of the true God of the universe. Hananiah was given the name of Shadrach and means illuminated by the sun god Rock, or a sun god, command of the moon god Aku, command of Aku, probably Marduk. So these are the translations of Shadrach, which I've gleaned from the commentaries and word meanings and what have you that I've been able to research on. So it all points to, particularly the sun god here. It refers to the sun god, and that we're talking about deep paganism in that. There's people that look at the sun today. What were they doing in the temple when they were facing east? That was in Ezekiel, facing east. Well, the Holy of Holies was to the west. They were facing east, and they was worshiping towards the east, the priests and people there in the temple in Jerusalem. What were they doing? They were worshiping towards the rising sun. So God destroyed Israel, moved him out into captivity because they were entertaining abominations and entertaining idols and worshiping foreign gods. Now, Mishael was given the name of Meshach, who is like Shak, a love goddess, or belonging to Shak, the wine goddess, who is what Aku, the moon god, is. Moon god is the original idol representing Allah, the moon god. But also the love goddess is Semiramis, or Ishtar, or Diana, Venus. So Mishael was given Meshach. Again, pagan gods were in the names of these Hebrew children. Now, Azariah was given the name of Abednego, the servant of Nebo, a fire god, or servant of the shining fire, or servant of Lucifer, the light bearer. Considered to be equivalent to Lucifer, Nebo is the second god of Babylon. Nebo is the son of Bel. Now, Nebo is the second god of Babylon, and Isaiah spoke of the gods of Babylon in Isaiah 46, verse 1. He says this, Bel boweth down, Nebo stoopeth. Their idols were upon the beast, and upon the cattle your carriages were heavy loaden. They are a burden to the weary beast. So, there you have it. Isaiah is talking about the very gods of Babylon that we're talking about. And what we see perverting this world today is nothing more than the religion of Babylon that has been restructured for modern times and sent out into the world and entered into the various religions of the world and entered the church of Jesus Christ. When we worship our God at Easter, Easter represents Ishtar. We have just taken, instead of saying Passover, we have taken the name of a pagan god and named our celebration of Passover Easter. We can't get around it. Now, to you and me, Easter doesn't represent that because we've lost that as a meaning. But nevertheless, that is the case. Now, names mean something, and there's Nebo in all his glory, representing who I said, Lucifer. Now, the Babylonian names revealed polytheism. Remember I said the names given to the Hebrew children represented monotheism, a single God. But the Babylonian names revealed polytheism and associated with the mystery religion, and that mystery religion is still with us today. And like I said, it's entered the church. It's entered the church in what is called emergent. It's entered the church in things, in ways of contemplative prayer that is being subscribed to by many well-known preachers today. So mystery religion is alive and well in the church of Jesus Christ. We just have to recognize it. We have to know what's going on in this church today. Not this church here, because Pastor Billy teaches about those things. But you have to be aware of the apostasy that is perverting the gospel of Jesus Christ. The Babylonian names reveal polytheism and are associated with mystery religion, Satan worship, and goddess worship. That's the point of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. It was goddess worship. That's what he was saying. You have a former vice president in his book, Earth in the Balance, is talking about a return to goddess worship. In his worship of the earth, the trees, and the environmental systems that we have. And he states that in his book, Earth in the Balance. You can actually read that for yourself. So he recommends a return to some sort of goddess worship. So the purpose of these Babylonian names was to divorce the children from the one true God. So what is happening today? And all these little side trips in the church that we take? We take these side trips with contemplative prayer. We have to center on nothing, if you will. Clear our minds so that we can receive some part of the divine. This is essentially what the contemplative prayer is all about. And it is mysticism in the church today. So, the purpose of the names was to deny the one true God in the names of the Hebrew children. These names were associated with Babylonian idols. So they're brainwashing them right down even to the names that they receive. And let me tell you, the entertainment industry is doing the same thing today. You know, I'm talking about the religious people in various churches doing it, but the entertainment industry is doing it even more. They've captured the minds of the children and many of the adults because they watch and listen to the perversions and don't think that there's anything wrong. It's just what our culture is today. Nothing wrong with it. That's what they say. Oh, you're just overdoing it. No, we're not overdoing it because it is perverting and infiltrating the church and the entertainment that we see today. We are returning to Sodom. We are returning to the times of Noah in our days here. And what does Jesus say in Matthew 24? It'll be just like the days of Noah. Each of these names was associated with a different Babylonian god. Bel, the chief god, Rock, the sun god, Shak, the earth god, and Nebo, the fire god, Lucifer. Even the name Nebuchadnezzar means the prince favored by Nemo, which was the fire god referred to in the name of Abednego. Nebo is also referred to as the god of learning and letters. Nebo was also the name of the planet Mercury. You see how all of these things are interchanged together, even to your astrology, the worship of stars. Chaos monster and the sun god. That's just a little depiction there of a Babylonian. Not sure where. I think that's a carving. But there you have the chaos monster and the sun god. You can see this is a picture depicting of what these people were all about, what their religion was. Okay? Babylon continued Nimrod's religion. Nimrod had a space program in his tower as we have today with our NASA space program. The United Nations is attempting to put the nations which God scattered at Nimrod's Tower of Babel back together again into a global new world order. Is that not happening today? Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah may have been made eunuchs, as evidenced by Isaiah's prophecy in 2 Kings chapter 20, verses 14 to 18. This was a practice that was done. They had no choice in this. And I can show you that it was prophesied in 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 14 to 18. And verse 14 says, Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, and said unto him, What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are from a far country, even from Babylon. And he said, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All the things that are in mine house they have seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. Hezekiah was bragging to foreign representatives, showing the treasures that he had, putting desire to have them by the enemies of Israel. And Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord. Isaiah is going to tell Hezekiah what's going to be the result. And he says, behold, the days come that all that is in thine house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day shall be carried into Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. So I believe that Daniel and his fellows were made eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. This is also confirmed in Isaiah, where we read, Isaiah put it in his book as well as it appears in 2 Kings, Isaiah chapter 39, verse 5. Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Serious business. No compromise. Daniel chapter 1, verses 8 to 21. Recall now that in verse 5, Daniel was to be fed from the king's table. Daniel 1, verse 5, and the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. The king's meat and wine were defiled by being meat and wine sacrificed to idols. After roasting before the idol, the meat was then served at the king's table. Those who ate participated in the worship of idols. Or it could have been the dietary laws found in the Old Testament that forbade the eating of certain foods. Whatever was really bothering Daniel, he was not going to compromise on it. Whether it was the dietary laws or whether it was abstaining from meat offered to idols. I believe it's a little of both. All of both. Watch now that Daniel takes a stand against compromising his values in any way. This is where we today have failed to take a stand in that we are willing to compromise our values. We must learn from this very important verse as we live in a Babylonian time, which we do live in today, where we are being asked to compromise our values daily, and we need to stand. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. In verse 9, but now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. Notice that God is working in Daniel. Daniel is not intending to compromise, and God is giving him the opportunity to fulfill his promise not to compromise. So in verse 10, and the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. So this prince of the eunuchs, he was worried about his head because it was the king who was telling the prince of the eunuchs what kind of food to feed them. And it was from the king's table. It was food sacrificed to idols. It was food that was not healthy for their bodies as well. And then, in verse 11, then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel. So there's a little intermediary there, and we have the name of this guy, Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And he says in verse 12, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. So, look, just give us 10 days. See if we're not feeling better, more sharper in our minds, and what have you, and let us eat vegetables. It was a vegetarian diet, but they were, pulse is a vegetable. So verse 13, then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. And so verse 14, so he consented to them in this manner and proved them 10 days. So Daniel refused to go along with the crowd. Notice that there were others that were eating the meats and the stuff from the tables. But Daniel and his friends said, no, we're not going to compromise. We want to eat food that is healthy for us and is not offensive to our God. So he dared to be different. Daniel and his friends dared to be different. He would not compromise. The king had arranged the diet. That was the problem for the prince of the eunuchs. The king had arranged the diet. So if these guys turn out to be sickly and not able to perform, then it was going to come on the head of the prince of the eunuchs. So the prince of the eunuchs would be taking a risk to agree to this request. So pulse in Hebrew means vegetables, fruit, or nuts. So that was the diet that was proposed for 10 days. And I guarantee you, if you eat vegetables, fruit, and nuts for 10 days, you will feel a whole lot better than you do today. I guarantee you that because I've done it, but I still tend to desire flesh, meat. So anyway, that's up to you on that one, as long as they're not sacrificed to idols. Daniel chapter 1, verse 15. And at the end of 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink and gave them pulse. He saw the results after 10 days, so he said, okay, I'm not going to lose my head. I'll be more in favor with the king if I give them the food that they desire. And verse 17, as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Their mind is clearer because they were eating better food, for one thing. But they also were connected. They were connected to God. Okay? Their minds were clearer, but their heart was connected to God. They did not compromise. Now, verse 18. Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And verse 19, and the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And verse 20, and all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found then 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. Now, it's clear that diet was important to their physical health, and not compromising was important to their spiritual health. Eunuchs. Now, it is most certain that Daniel and his friends were made eunuchs. We should be clear of that, and there are certainly eunuchs mentioned in Matthew chapter 19, verse 12. For there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, and there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. Certainly Daniel, though, had no choice. Daniel didn't have choice of anything when he went there. He had to do what they said to do, but he did not compromise. He would obey up to the point of disobedience to God. That's what we need to do, is obey the authorities that set over us up to the point that they require us to disobey our God. Then we have to draw the line and say, this far, no more. Knowledge and skill. God gave the Hebrew children and Daniel knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. In addition, God gave Daniel understanding in all visions and dreams. They were extraordinary in their mental abilities. They had education, and they had the wisdom to make proper use of it. Education is not going to save you. Education is important, but it's not going to save you. It is your adherence to the Word of God in your heart and your belief of who He is and your belief of what He did for you that is going to save you. Not all the education in the world will save you, but because of their obedience, God gave them wisdom and knowledge and understanding, visions and dreams. And the education they received in Babylon was the pagan religion. That's what they received there. But they made proper use of what they were taught. We see a parallel between Daniel, who was educated in heathen Chaldean wisdom, and Moses, who was educated at the heathen Egyptian court. Both were educated in heathen religions. In Acts chapter 7, verse 22, we find this, and Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds. Both Daniel and Moses would put to shame the wisdom of the world by the wisdom of God. When push came to shove, both Daniel and Moses would not compromise their belief in what God had told him to do. The first year of King Cyrus. In Daniel 1:21, it says this, and Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. So it's telling you how long Daniel then continued then in Babylon. Actually, Daniel died. He never returned to Jerusalem. So he died there. It is believed that there's a grave in Iran that is purported to be Daniel's grave. Don't forget, the Persians took over the Babylonian empire, so Daniel also moved to Susa, which is in modern-day Iran. So anyway, King Cyrus now was he existed between 559 and 530 BC. So the first year of King Cyrus corresponds to the end of the Babylonian exile. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 22, it says, "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all the kingdom and put it also in writing, saying," verse 23, "Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord God of heaven given me, and he hath charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? The Lord his God be with him, and let him go up." So Cyrus let the people return to Jerusalem to build their temple. And Ezra says this in chapter 1, verse 1. "Now, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia," again, we have a date mentioned, the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, "that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, and he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the world, and he hath charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah." And Ezra 6, verse 3, "In the first year of Cyrus the king, the same Cyrus the king made a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be builded, the place where they offered sacrifices, and let the foundations thereof be strongly laid, the height thereof 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 80 cubits. So, God works wonders through various people. Had Daniel compromised back there with the food, none of this would have happened. Through Daniel, anyway. Daniel would not have been the one to write this book if he had compromised. Cyrus may have returned Babylon because it was prophesied in other places, but it may have not been Daniel. Compromise, no compromise is what we need to realize. So this indicates that Ezra lived and acted throughout the entire Babylonian exile. The time of the first year of King Cyrus was about 534 BC. Now, this is the first year of his reign, 534 BC. We will see in chapter 10 that Ezra was still around in the third year of Cyrus. So do not compromise. Do not compromise. Daniel and his colleagues refused to compromise with the world system. They refused to compromise. They made the best of the situation, but refused to dishonor God by the appearance of the worship of idols. We need to learn that as followers of Christ, we need to trust God, pray in all situations, and not give an appearance of agreeing with the world's morality that is rampant today. The world is sick and perverted, and we're making laws to protect it. So we, as a nation, are compromising big time. And it's all prophesied right here in your Bible. And as we go through Daniel, we'll see this coming clear. Luke chapter 12, verse 37, "Blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Verily I say unto you that he shall gird himself and make them to sit down to meat, and will come forth and serve them. And if he shall come in the second watch, or come in the third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. And verse 39, and this know that if the good man of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not have suffered his house to be broken through. Be ye therefore ready also, for the Son of Man cometh at an hour when ye think not. We are to watch. We're to look at the world for what it is. We're to look at our nation for what it has become. And we are to stay firm in the gospel of Jesus Christ. We are not to compromise, like Daniel did not compromise. Watch. Look at what is going on. Don't participate in what is going on. One day Jesus is coming back. We know that. As Christians, we know that. Is it today? Is he coming back today? Is he coming back tomorrow? We don't know. But he's coming back, and he's coming back soon. The world cannot get more rotten, or much more rotten than it already is, if we take his word to be true. What will he find us doing when he returns? Are we going to be participating in the world system today? When he comes back, are we going to participate in that system? What an embarrassment it will be if he finds us compromising with the world. What an embarrassment. Hello? Think about it. Watch. What will Jesus find us doing when he returns? You need to look at that carefully. What will Jesus find us doing when he returns? It's the end.